The Pittsburgh Steelers advance to 9-7 with their 30-23 win over the Seattle Seahawks, keeping their playoff hopes alive. I'm Chris Carter, and this is your Locked On Now reaction on the Locked On Steelers podcast to their big win over the Seattle Seahawks. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast, and this is a reaction episode to the Steelers winning their game against the Seattle Seahawks. We'll have our full episode out shortly later here tonight on New Year's Eve so that you all can enjoy that either on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, whenever you like it. But we have to talk about this win, y'all, because the Steelers did exactly what I said they had to do in the trenches, and that was dominate the trenches. Najee Harris, 27 carries, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jaylen Warren, 13 carries, 75 yards, a touchdown. They also converted multiple quarterback sneaks throughout the game. All in all, running the ball, the Steelers had 14 first downs on rushing the ball. The Seahawks had 4. The Steelers running the ball, 202 total yards on 46 plays, a 4.4 yards per carry average. Huge, and I mean huge, from this offense to deliver in that way. Much of it from this offensive line that bullied the Seahawks all throughout the game. We said that was going to be a key weakness that the Steelers had to attack of the Seahawks, and they did just that. And while they weren't alone, it was a balanced attack from the Steelers offense, whereas the rushing offense got the scoring done. Mason Rudolph, another efficient game, 18 of 24, 274 passing yards, 131 of them went to George Pickens, who has a phenomenal game yet again. And we will get into the Mason Rudolph discussion more in the full podcast. But right now, you can't take the ball out of his hands with how hot he is. The Steelers have now scored 30 points in back-to-back games for the first time since 2020. And this offense looks formidable. Granted, against 2 lackluster defenses that they probably won't do that against some of the better defenses in the NFL, but they absolutely needed both of these performances. They might have been able to get away with a kind of middling offense. They got 20 points last week against the Bengals when they had just 11 points. But this week, you had to have it against the Seahawks offense that, give credit to Geno Smith, he played a tough game, dodged several sacks, 290 passing yards for him, 23 of 33 for a touchdown and no interceptions. He had a pass rating of 106.9. And again, your defense, it's hurt up. Minka Fitzpatrick still wasn't available. Trenton Thompson wasn't available. Elandon Roberts wasn't available. They were hurt all up and down the field. You even saw minor injuries happen to TJ Watt and Joey Porter Jr. And still, the Steelers defense was able to hold in key situations, but the offense did more than enough to get the win. And now it's gonna cause a lot of conversations right now around Pittsburgh about what's gonna happen moving forward. Kenny Pickett was made inactive for this game. He was not even suited to go as the Steelers' primary backup, which was what I thought would be the case, considering he was saying how healthy he was earlier in the week and that he feels like he should be ready to go. The Steelers, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle this, because in my opinion, the question isn't will they put Kenny Pickett back in. The question is, will Kenny Pickett be inactive again next week? Because Mason Rudolph is your starter against the Ravens next week. And the situation that this has created, you cannot take the synergy out of this offense right now when everything is humming right now. I mean, everything. George Pickens, you had 3 players with over 4 catches. George Pickens had 7 for 131. Deontay Johnson caught all 4 of his targets for 76 yards. Johnson also a huge onside kick recovery to give the Steelers the ball back. Jaylen Warren, 4 catches for 23 yards, also contributing there. Pat Freiermuth, 3 catches on 4 targets for 44 yards. But again, you go back to the ground game, the Steelers getting it in huge ways. Even when the Seahawks saw it coming, there were so many times the Steelers just bullied them off the ball. Broderick Jones just pancaking people. James Daniels moving people. Isaac Seumalo doing a great job as well. Dan Moore even getting to the second level of the defense on Jaylen Warren's touchdown run early in this game. That offensive line deserves a lot of commendation. Mason Cole, still some bad snaps, but you got to give them credit for being part of a unit that dominated the game in a large part. They deserve a lot of kudos in this game, and we'll break down more of that in the full episode. But we also got to talk about this defense and the players who did step up, because there's one in particular, a few in particular, and they're the younger guys in the team, the rookies who stepped up in big situations. Stick with me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. This is our reaction episode to the Steelers beating the Seahawks 30-23. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're talking about the Steelers win 30-23 over the Seattle Seahawks here. Let's talk about the defense. We talked a lot about the offense, and we'll get more into the offense. If you're wanting more talk about that, I'll get to that as soon as I can in the full episode that we have coming out. Remember, this is just the reaction episode. I get these out so that we can have, quicker reactions. I know some of y'all are thirsty for post-game immediate reaction thoughts here. But on the defensive side of the ball, there were some times you were really concerned about it. You looked at how the Steelers played before Kenneth Walker got hurt. He had 10 carries for 53 yards, not a good rate, and he was moving the ball for the Seahawks. I think you saw, and then a lot of times when the Seahawks were throwing the ball, it was down the middle, right where I said that they were going to need to attack this Steelers defense with Eric Rowe and Miles Jack as your two practice squad guys who were making crucial starts in the middle part of the field. And lo and behold, those were the two top leading tacklers. 10 tackles for Rowe, 8 tackles for Miles Jack, also 3 tackles for Patrick Peterson. But interestingly enough, the Steelers, with the rest of their tackles, very evenly spread out. After that, Peterson has 3, Ogunjobi with 2, Miles Killer had 2, TJ Watt with 2, Shannon Sullivan had 2, Elijah Riley had 2, Mark Robinson had 2. It was pretty evenly spread out across the board. And I think a part of that was, they were saying, hey, there's going to be places we have to kind of surrender because we don't have the guys to match up right now, but we're going to win situational football. And that's what the Steelers did in this situation. They held the Seahawks to just 3 of 9 on third downs. And I think a big part of that is when you look at the 9 part of that, they only had 9 third down attempts all game. And part of what helped that situation was the Steelers offense possessing the football, because they didn't allow the Seahawks to get too many chances again. And again, this comes back to the offense's success running the ball. 37 minutes and 33 seconds of time of possession for the Steelers, 22 minutes and 27 seconds time of possession for the Seahawks. The defense doesn't get to make the plays that it did, or it doesn't get to have some of the stops that it did if the Seahawks keep getting the ball back and keep getting the ball back like they might have if this was a Steelers offense earlier in the season that was mightily struggling. If we're pointing at 2 people that really stood out for you on defense today, 2 guys that made some big plays. Nick Herbig, the play of the game, maybe even the play of the season, with his sack, forced fumble, and recovery on the Seahawks that gave the Steelers field goal position late in the game. As he was able to set that up. And that was just a huge play where the Steelers were able to get that from him. They were able to move the chains just one time, and then wind about 2.5 minutes off the clock, get a field goal, and that put the pressure on the Seahawks to have to score in 2 possessions with about 2.5 minutes to go. Just huge effort from them from the Steelers defense and from Nick Herbig to make that happen. TJ Watt doesn't get a sack in this game, but man, was he causing havoc everywhere and drawing several plays that should have been called holding penalties. I mean, there was a third down play where the Seahawks were driving into the Steelers end zone, and he just gets absolutely tackled in a crucial part of the game, and it was just terrible. He even got hurt on the play, and the Steelers had to play without him. But a guy who stands up, and a guy I highlighted in our later episodes this week, Joey Porter Jr., who twice being one-on-one with DK Metcalf, had a pass breakup at the goal line and then pinned him to the sidelines. So the throw had to go out of bounds. DK Metcalf, the ball did hit his hands, but even if he had held on to it, his feet would have been out of bounds, would have been incomplete. And much of that is because Joey Porter Jr. had great coverage in that game. And he's a rookie going up against top receivers week in and week out and delivering for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It looks like the Steelers got a dog at the cornerback position there with Joey Porter Jr. And again, you look at the defense winning situationally, even when they're giving up yards. There's certainly parts of the game you wish you could have done better there. Certainly situations where you felt like, man, if they had just done this right or just done that right, they would have been in a better position. But the Steelers team still got it done when they absolutely needed it to. One thing that we talked about also, actually I talked about this on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and we talked about this, but was the red zone opportunities. And the Steelers had one of the best red zone defenses in the NFL. The Seahawks had one of the worst red zone offenses. The Seahawks went 2 of 3 in the red zone, so they actually did well. But the Steelers went 3 of 7, not a great percentage. But the fact that they got 7 red zone drives compared to the Seahawks 3 red zone drives, I think that speaks to the Steelers winning the field position battle more often than not. We'll talk a lot more about this game and all the things that went into it and all the things that set it up. Also, what does this mean for the Steelers' playoff hopes? What do they need to happen? All that and more here on the full episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stay tuned. That will be out very soon.